Story number 1. The House That Follows. I was 8 years old when I first saw the house, a shadowy structure, barely visible through the dense snowfall, standing alone in the woods behind my grandparents' cabin. At first, I thought it was just an abandoned place, forgotten by time. But something about it felt wrong. The windows were too dark. The roof seemed too still, and even the falling snow refused to settle on it. I remember watching from the window, hypnotized until my grandfather pulled me away. Never go near that house, he said, his voice unusually firm. It doesn't belong here. I wanted to ask what he meant, but the look in his eyes shut me up. That night, I dreamt of the house, except in my dream I was inside it. The walls were narrow, pressing in on me. The floor creaked with every breath, and in the corner of the dimly lit room, something watched me. Years passed, and the memory of that house faded into childhood nightmares until last winter. I was driving through a blizzard, heading toward a rental cabin for a short getaway. The roads were deserted, the world swallowed in an endless sheet of white. My phone's GPS had lost signal miles ago, leaving me relying on memory and gut instinct. That's when I saw it. Standing right off the road, barely visible through the swirling snow. The house. I slammed the brakes, my pulse hammering against my ribs. It was impossible. That house had been behind my grandparents' cabin, miles away. But here it was, exactly the same, as if it had been waiting for me. My first instinct was to drive away, but something made me stay. Maybe it was morbid curiosity. Maybe it was the way the snow around it remained untouched, as if no wind or storm could touch it. I stepped out of my car, the cold biting deep into my skin. The house loomed ahead, silent, expectant. As I got closer, my breath hitched. The front door was open. I don't remember deciding to go inside. My legs just moved like I was being pulled forward. The moment I stepped over the threshold, the wind outside vanished. No sound. No cold. Just thick, suffocating silence. The interior was exactly like my dream from childhood. The same narrow hallways, the same creaking floorboards. The walls were lined with portraits, but they weren't normal paintings. They were photos. Old, faded, covered in dust. And in every single one, I saw myself. My heart pounded so hard it hurt. The pictures showed me at different ages, watching the house from the window at my grandparents' place, sitting in my car, on the highway, standing at my apartment door. They weren't just random memories. They were moments when I had felt watched. I turned, ready to bolt, but the doorway was gone. The entrance I had walked through had been swallowed by darkness, replaced by an endless, twisting hallway stretching far beyond what the house should allow. A deep, rattling breath echoed behind me. I wasn't alone. I forced myself to move, my boots scraping against the warped wooden floor. The hallway twisted, narrowing. The walls breathed, shifting as I passed. Something soft brushed my shoulder. I jerked away, but there was nothing there, just shadows stretching across the walls like they were alive. Then I heard the whisper, a voice that sounded like mine, not an echo, not a trick. It was me, calling my own name from somewhere deeper inside the house. Panic surged through me. I turned corners blindly, my breath ragged, my mind screaming for an exit. Every hallway looked the same, the air growing colder, heavier. The pictures on the walls changed as I ran. The once still images of me were moving, turning their heads, their eyes tracking me. I stumbled into a large room, my hands shaking. It looked like a dining hall, but the chairs were wrong. All of them turned toward the doorway, facing me like an audience waiting for a performance. The long table was set for a feast, but the food was rotten, covered in frost and crawling with something that looked like human teeth. And at the head of the table, something sat waiting, a figure wrapped in shadows, its face obscured by the dim candlelight. But I didn't need to see it. I felt it, the same presence from my childhood nightmares. It lifted its hand slowly, motioning to the chair at the opposite end. It wanted me to sit. I backed away, my pulse slamming against my skull. I had to get out, had to wake up, a crash behind me. A mirror, covered in frost, had shattered on the wall, and in its broken reflection, I didn't see the house around me. I saw the road outside, my car, the snow, the headlights. I saw myself standing outside the house, staring in, and then, with a slow, crawling realization, I saw something else, something standing behind me. It had my face. The thing at the table laughed, a cold, rattling sound that made my bones vibrate. The lights flickered, and for a split second I saw the walls, the floors, the entire house, covered in frozen bodies, their mouths open in silent screams, their eyes wide and locked onto mine. The floor cracked beneath me, ice spreading through the wood like veins. The shadows reached out, curling around my arms, my legs, dragging me deeper, deeper. I don't remember how I got out. 1 second, I was drowning in the dark. The next, I was in my car, my hands gripping the wheel so tightly, my knuckles had gone white. The house was gone. No footprints in the snow, no sign that it had ever been there. I gunned the engine, my entire body trembling. The house had been real, the thing inside had been real. And worst of all, I knew this wasn't over, because as I drove away, my headlights caught something in the distance. A house, standing at the edge of the forest, barely visible through the snowfall. Waiting, and this time it was closer. Story number 2. The man who wrote my death. The first time I saw the book, it was already too late. The snowstorm had forced me to take shelter in a tiny bookstore on the edge of town, the kind of place that shouldn't have been open that late. The bell above the door didn't ring when I stepped inside. The air smelled of dust and old paper, and the only light came from a dim bulb hanging above the wooden counter. I should have turned around. I should have walked right back out into the cold. But something about the place held me in place. There was no one behind the counter, no sign of a shopkeeper. The shelves stretched impossibly far back, disappearing into the shadows. My breath misted in the air, and for a second, I thought I saw movement between the shelves. Just the barest flicker, something shifting in the dark. That's when I saw it. A book, thick, leather-bound, covered in frost, sitting open on a wooden table in the center of the store. There was no title, no author's name, but the moment I looked at it, I felt something pull me toward it. My fingers trembled as I reached out, and as soon as I touched the pages, a sharp chill ran up my spine, like ice crawling under my skin. The words were handwritten, the ink faded and uneven. At first, they seemed like random passages, disjointed, meaningless. But then I saw my name. I blinked, my pulse slamming against my ribs. I read the sentence again. He stepped inside the bookstore, shaking off the snow, unaware that he was already trapped. My stomach lurched. I flipped the page. The words continued, describing everything I had just done, walking through the shelves, seeing the book, reading these exact lines. I could feel my breath quicken, but I forced myself to keep reading. Then I saw the next paragraph. He felt something watching him from the darkened aisles. He turned around, but there was nothing there. My blood ran cold, my hands shook. I lifted my head and looked around. The store was silent, empty, but something felt wrong. I swallowed hard, forcing a laugh under my breath. It had to be a joke, a prank. Someone was messing with me. I flipped through more pages, looking for anything that would explain what was happening. The text kept going, paragraph after paragraph, every word matching my exact movements. Then I reached the last page, and then he heard the bell on the bookstore door ring, signaling someone had stepped inside, but the shop was empty. The moment I finished reading, the bell rang. I nearly dropped the book. My body froze, every muscle locked in place. I turned my head slowly, my breath caught in my throat. The door was open. The winter air swirled in, carrying fresh snow across the wooden floor. But there was no one there. Something cracked behind me. A footstep. I spun around, my heart hammering. The aisle behind the table stretched into darkness, books stacked high, the shadows between the shelves too deep. My breath hitched. The lights flickered once, and I saw it. A figure, standing between the books, barely visible in the dim light. It wasn't moving. It wasn't breathing, but it was watching me. The book in my hands trembled. My fingers felt frozen against the pages. I wanted to run, but my feet wouldn't move. Then slowly, the figure stepped forward. It wasn't a man. Not exactly. The shape was wrong. Its body stretched too tall, its arms too long, its fingers dragging along the floor. Its face was a blur, shifting as if it wasn't meant to be seen. And yet somehow, I knew what it was. The author. I felt a wordless scream crawl up my throat, but I couldn't make a sound. The lights flickered again, and suddenly it was closer, just a few feet away. The book's pages flipped wildly in my hands as if the wind itself was turning them. I looked down, and my stomach twisted. The words were changing. Ink bled across the pages, forming new sentences, writing my actions in real time. He tried to run, but the exit was already gone. I bolted toward the door. My legs moved too slow, like I was wading through frozen water. My fingers stretched for the handle, but the second I reached it, the entire door vanished. Nothing but a solid wall in front of me. A slow exhale filled the air behind me. I turned my head, dread curling in my stomach. The figure stood inches away now, close enough that I could feel the cold radiating from its skin. Its mouth twisted open, but no words came out. Instead, I heard them in my head. You are not the first. A hand, if I could even call it that, rose slowly, the fingers bent at unnatural angles, reaching for me, moving in a way that wasn't human. I gripped the book tighter. The pages kept writing. And then he made a choice. The words glowed, burning against the paper. I didn't understand, but my body moved on instinct. Without thinking, I ripped the last page from the book. The moment the paper tore, the store shook. The lights burst. The shelves cracked. The air turned heavy, thick with something ancient and furious. I stumbled back, and in the dim glow of the failing light, I saw the figure screaming, but there was no sound. It melted, or maybe it was unwritten. The shape collapsed into ink, splattering across the floor, seeping into the pages of the book as if it had never existed. And then everything went black. I woke up in my car. The storm had passed. My hands were shaking against the steering wheel, my breath coming in ragged gasps. For a moment I sat there, trying to make sense of what had happened. The bookstore was gone. The road ahead was clear. No footprints, no door, no sign that the shop had ever existed. And yet, the book sat beside me on the passenger seat. But now, there were no words inside, Just one single blank page, waiting for the next story to be written. Story number 3, the ice in their eyes. I first noticed the change in my neighbors on the coldest night of the year. The snow had been relentless, burying cars, swallowing streets, turning the town into an endless stretch of white silence. I had been stuck inside for days, watching the blizzard rage through my window, when I saw old Mrs. Holloway standing outside in nothing but a thin nightgown. She wasn't moving. Her body was rigid, arms hanging limply at her sides. Snow clung to her skin, but she didn't shiver. She didn't even blink. But it was her eyes that made my stomach turn, frosted over, glassy, and unnatural ice blue, like something was frozen deep inside her. I yanked my curtain shut, my heart hammering. Maybe she was sick. Maybe she was confused. But when I looked again a few minutes later, she was gone. The only thing left in the untouched snow was a set of footprints leading away, but none leading back. That was the first night. The next morning, the town felt wrong. The streets were too quiet. There were no tire tracks on the roads, no footprints on the sidewalks, just an unbroken layer of snow, stretching for miles. And then I saw them, my neighbors, standing at their windows, all of them, men, women, children. They were pressed against the glass of their houses, staring out into the street. Their faces were blank, their expressions too still, their eyes, that same horrifying shade of frozen blue. I told myself it was just the weather. Cabin fever. I had been locked inside for too long, my mind playing tricks on me. But then my phone rang. I nearly jumped out of my skin before scrambling to answer. My best friend, Eric, was on the line. His voice was hoarse, panicked. "Have you seen them?" he whispered. "They're watching." I swallowed hard, my throat dry. "What's happening?" "They changed," he rasped. "Last night." They weren't like this before. I pressed a hand against my window, peering out carefully. A woman across the street stood frozen in place, her breath fogging up the glass. She didn't move, didn't react, just stared. I lowered my voice. "Eric, I think something's wrong with them. They're not them anymore." A chill crawled up my spine. Eric exhaled shakily. "It's the storm," he muttered, "or whatever's inside it." A heavy silence stretched between us. Then his voice dropped lower, barely a whisper. "I don't think they can see us yet, but they will." The call ended. That night, the town was silent. No wind, no movement, just an unbearable stillness, like the world itself was holding its breath. I kept my lights off, my curtains drawn, but curiosity gnawed at me until I peeked through a crack in the blinds. My stomach twisted. The people outside were moving now. Not normally. Their heads turned at unnatural angles, bodies stiff, footsteps soundless against the snow. They walked without urgency, without direction, just wandering. But their eyes, those ice blue eyes, darted around too fast, searching. I backed away from the window, my pulse thundering in my ears. The floor creaked beneath me, and I froze. Outside, the searching stopped. One by one, the wandering figures turned toward my house, toward me. I didn't breathe, didn't move, but something deep inside me knew. They had heard me. A single knock rattled my front door, then another, then a dozen, 100. The pounding grew, a relentless, inhuman rhythm. The walls shook with the force of it, and then all at once it stopped. I stood there, heart slamming against my ribs, the silence heavier than the storm outside. Minutes passed, maybe hours. Finally, I found the courage to inch toward the door and press my eye against the peephole. There was nothing. Just an empty, snow-covered porch. No footprints, no sign that anyone had ever been there, but I knew better. Morning came, but the sun never did. The sky remained a suffocating gray, the snow piling higher, the town trapped in its endless winter. And the people? They were still there, standing, watching, waiting. Then the power went out. My house sank into complete darkness. The heater died, the air turning frigid within minutes. I grabbed a flashlight, my breath curling in the frozen air. That's when I heard it. A slow, rhythmic scraping from inside the house. The sound of ice cracking, spreading, crawling toward me. I turned, the beam of my flashlight flickering against the hallway. The frost was growing along the walls, stretching from the floor, spreading like veins. And in the center of it, something moved, a shape buried beneath the ice. It was me, frozen, trapped behind the glassy surface, my face twisted in a silent scream. My reflection blinked, its eyes turning that same unnatural frozen blue, and then its mouth moved. "Let us in." The walls groaned. The ice splintered outward, reaching for me. Bursting through the front door, I stumbled into the snow, my lungs burning from the cold. My neighbors were closer now, standing in the street waiting. I didn't look at them. I just ran through the endless snow, past frozen houses, past roads that led nowhere anymore. The town had disappeared. The world had disappeared. All that remained was the snow and the eyes. I don't know how long I ran. My legs ached. My lungs screamed. My vision blurred. But just when I thought I would collapse, I saw it. A flicker of warmth. A dim, distant light. A house. I staggered toward it, desperate, praying for safety. The door was unlocked. I slammed it behind me, gasping for air, my body trembling. Only then did I realize I had been here before. The furniture was the same, the pictures on the walls, my childhood drawings still taped to the fridge. This was my house, but it wasn't mine anymore. I turned slowly, dread curling deep in my stomach. Through the window, I saw them, the people, the watchers, their frozen bodies pressed against the glass, their eyes glowing that horrific icy blue. And behind them, the storm moved, not the wind, not the snow, the storm itself, shifting, breathing, watching. I backed away, my heart beat a deafening roar in my ears. My reflection in the darkened window stared at me, mouth slightly parted, as if trying to whisper something, and then I realized it wasn't my reflection, it was smiling. Story number 4, the missing cabin. The first thing I remember is the silence, not the usual quiet of snowfall, not the muffled hush of the woods in winter. This was absolute silence, like the world itself had been muted. No wind, no rustling trees, not even the sound of my own breath. That's what made me open my eyes. The cabin was gone. I shot up from the sleeping bag, my heart hammering against my ribs. Snow stretched in every direction, an endless white landscape. My fingers were stiff with cold. As I rubbed my face, trying to wake myself up. Maybe I had wandered outside in my sleep. Maybe I was dreaming. But no, the footprints around me were mine, circling the spot where I had been lying. And they were the only ones. I turned, searching for the cabin, the place where I had fallen asleep, where my friends had been, the small wooden walls, the flickering fire, the laughter that had filled the air just hours ago. But there was nothing, just smooth, untouched snow. I was alone. Panic clawed its way up my throat. I had to think, had to stay calm. The cabin had been deep in the woods, but not that far from the main road. If I could just retrace my steps, I'd find it again. I scanned the ground, looking for the path we had taken, the tracks we had left behind when we arrived. There were none. I forced my breathing to slow, but my hands shook as I dug through my coat pockets for my phone. No signal. I tried again, whispering a curse under my breath. Still nothing. The battery percentage blinked at 1%, and then the screen went black. A sound broke the silence. A soft crunch. I whipped around. The snow behind me wasn't smooth anymore. A fresh set of footprints had appeared, leading toward me. My breath caught in my throat. The prints were deep, heavy, but there was no one there. No shape in the distance. No sign of movement. Just the trail of steps ending a few feet behind me. I wasn't alone. The air was colder now, the temperature dropping so fast I felt it in my bones. I pulled my jacket tighter, but it didn't help. The silence pressed against me, thick and unnatural. And then I heard it. Whispers, not voices, not words. Just the faintest murmur of something unseen. It came from nowhere and everywhere at once, shifting with the windless air. I took a step back. The footprints behind me deepened. I ran. The snow crunched beneath my boots as I sprinted, lungs burning with the sharp cold. I didn't know where I was going, didn't care. I just needed to get away. Trees blurred past me, dark figures against the endless white. My breath came in ragged gasps, my vision blurring. Then I saw it, a shape in the distance, a structure barely visible through the falling snow. My chest tightened with relief. The cabin. It had to be. I pushed forward, forcing my frozen limbs to move faster. The closer I got, the clearer it became. The wooden walls, the slanted roof, the door hanging slightly open. But something was wrong. It wasn't the same. The wood was older. The windows covered in frost so thick I couldn't see inside. The door creaked as I stepped onto the porch, but no warmth greeted me. No firelight. No voices. I hesitated, my breath curling in the air. The whispers had stopped. The silence had returned, heavier than before. I stepped inside. The cabin was empty. The fireplace was cold. The furniture covered in dust. Everything looked abandoned, untouched for years. But there were signs, things that shouldn't have been there. My backpack, my coat draped over a chair, my footprints in the dust. I swallowed hard, my pulse thudding against my skull. I had never been here before. Had I? My head ached. The air too thick, too wrong. Then I saw the photograph. It sat on the wooden table, half buried under a layer of frost. I reached for it with numb fingers, brushing away the ice, my body locked up. It was a picture of me, standing in front of this cabin. But my face was wrong. The expression too empty, the eyes too hollow, as if whatever had taken the picture had captured something else inside me. A sound creaked from the other room, a floorboard shifting. I turned slowly, my breath frozen in my chest. A figure stood in the doorway. Not a person. Not exactly. It looked like me, but taller, thinner, its limbs too long, its face stretched into something that wasn't quite human. It smiled. I stumbled backward, my heartbeat slamming against my ribs. The thing didn't move, didn't breathe, just stared. Its frozen blue eyes locked onto mine. And then it whispered, "You found me." The cabin shook. The walls groaned, the wooden beams splintering under some unseen weight. The air thickened, pressing against my skin like something was crawling through it. I turned to run, but the door wasn't there anymore. The walls closed in, the floor warping beneath my feet. My vision blurred, shadows stretching, twisting. And then I wasn't in the cabin anymore. I was in the snow, lying on my back, staring at the gray sky. My hands were numb, my breath shallow. Slowly, I sat up. The cabin was gone. No footprints, no sign that it had ever been there. Just endless white, stretching in every direction. And then I saw the photograph, lying in the snow beside me. A picture of me, standing in front of the cabin that no longer existed. And behind me, in the image, something else stood watching. Story number 5. The static in the snow. The radio was already there when I found the cabin. I had been driving for hours, trying to beat the worst of the storm, but the snow was relentless. It swallowed the road, turned the trees into shapeless shadows, and eventually forced my car to a complete stop. There was no visibility, no way to tell where the road ended and the wilderness began. My only choice was to find shelter. That's when I saw it. A small wooden cabin, barely visible through the blizzard, sitting alone in the endless white. It shouldn't have been there. My GPS had shown nothing for miles, but there it was, standing in silence, waiting. I forced my way through the knee-deep snow, my breath ragged, my fingers numb even under my gloves. The door was unlocked. Inside, the air was stale and frozen, but it was shelter. The cabin was empty. One small bed, a wooden table, and a fireplace filled with cold ash. But on the table, a radio sat waiting. It was an old model, bulky and dust-covered, the kind I hadn't seen in years. The dial was cracked, the speaker worn, but as soon as I touched it, a burst of static filled the room. The sound sent a shiver down my spine. I twisted the dial, searching for a station, something, anything, news, music, a weather report. But every channel was the same, just static. And then, through the crackling, I heard it. A voice, faint, almost drowned by the white noise, but definitely a voice. It was a woman, whispering, her words broken by the interference. "Are you there?" I swallowed hard, adjusting the frequency, trying to clear the signal. Static warped, twisting in on itself, shifting like something alive. The voice crackled again, clearer this time. "Leave. Now." My hands froze on the dial. The room suddenly felt colder. I turned my head slowly, my breath curling in the freezing air. The cabin was silent. The storm outside howled, pressing against the walls. But inside, something felt wrong. Then the voice changed. It was still a whisper, but it wasn't the woman anymore. It was my voice. "Why didn't you listen?" My heart stopped. The lights flickered, dimming for just a second. The cabin felt smaller, the air thicker, like the walls were closing in. I turned the radio off, but the static kept going. The dial wasn't moving, but the noise was still there, crackling through the silence. And then, underneath it, footsteps, software slow, inside the cabin. I didn't turn around. I couldn't. The static grew louder, filling my ears, my skull pressing against me like a physical weight. I squeezed my eyes shut, gripping the edge of the table. My heartbeat was a deafening thud, thud, thud in my chest. Then the voice whispered again, "You're not alone." A breath touched the back of my neck. I spun around. The cabin was empty. The door was still closed. The windows were still shut. The snow outside was untouched. But I knew what I had felt. I wasn't alone. The radio clicked. I turned back to it, pulse hammering. The static had stopped. The speaker was silent. And then, slowly, the dial began to turn on its own. A new station. A new voice. It was a recording. A voice message. "This is a warning. If you can hear this, it's already watching you. Don't let it in. Don't let it speak. Don't look at its face. The message cut off. The static returned. The lights flickered again, longer this time. The air grew even colder, my breath hanging thick in the air. Then, the radio dial moved backward. The woman's whisper returned. "It's behind you." I bolted for the door. The handle was frozen. My fingers burned as I yanked at it, my breath coming in gasps. The static roared in my ears, growing sharper, the voice distorting, twisting into something else. "Stay. I threw my weight against the door. The cabin groaned, the walls shuddering like they were alive. The lights pulsed, then died. Darkness swallowed the room. For a split second I saw something, not a shadow, not a person, something wrong. Too tall, too thin, no face, just a mouth. A grin that stretched too wide, filled with static, the sound buzzing inside my head. Then the door burst open. The cold hit me like a wall. I fell into the snow, gasping for air, scrambling to my feet. The cabin was gone. No door, no walls, nothing. Just the radio, half buried in the snow, still crackling, and a single set of footprints leading away from me, not mine. Story number 6. The Stranger. In my memories. The first time I noticed him, I was flipping through old photographs in my childhood home. The storm outside had trapped me there longer than expected. Snow piling against the windows, turning the world outside into a featureless white void. I had been bored, digging through boxes in the attic when I found an old photo album, dusty, worn, filled with pictures of birthdays, summer vacations, school events, snapshots of a life I barely remembered. And in every single one of them, he was there. I didn't notice at first. He wasn't the focus of the pictures, just a shadow in the background. A man standing at the edge of a group photo, a figure sitting at the back of a classroom, a face blurred behind a window. I frowned, flipping back through the pages. I didn't recognize him. Tall, thin, always wearing the same dark coat, his face just out of focus. I turned to a picture of my 8th birthday party, me blowing out candles, surrounded by laughing friends. And in the far corner near the edge of the frame, he stood watching. A sharp chill crawled down my spine. I flipped through faster. School events, holiday gatherings, family outings, always there, never changing, never interacting. This didn't make sense. I grabbed another album, more pictures, more memories, and in every single one, the stranger appeared. The same height, the same coat, the same silent presence lingering just behind the moment. My breath hitched, my hands trembled, because I wasn't just looking at childhood photos anymore. I was looking at recent ones too. A picture from last year, taken at a friend's wedding. There he was standing near the exit, a selfie I took last month. His reflection in a window behind me. A photo I had taken just yesterday outside in the snow. And there he was, staring right at the camera. I dropped the album. My pulse pounded in my ears. This wasn't normal. This wasn't possible. Someone would have noticed him before, right? Someone would have asked who he was. Then I remembered. I had been alone when I took that last picture. A creak echoed from the hallway. I snapped my head up. Breath caught in my throat. The house was silent. The kind of silence that pressed against you. Thick and unnatural. I stood slowly, my limbs stiff. My heart beat a thudding rhythm against my ribs. The hallway stretched in front of me, dark and empty. But something felt off. The old wooden floorboards had always groaned under weight. That was normal. But the last creak hadn't come from beneath my feet. It had come from behind me. I turned. The attic was small, cluttered, filled with forgotten boxes and discarded furniture. My eyes darted over the shadows, searching. I was alone, wasn't I? The lights flickered. The old bulb overhead buzzed, dimmed, and for just a second I saw him, standing in the reflection of the attic window. Watching me, I spun around, heart hammering, but the space behind me was empty. The window was fogged over from the cold. Frost creep in at the edges. But I had seen him. I had seen him. My breath came in quick gasps. My fingers were ice cold. I needed to leave. Now I grabbed my phone, flipping to the last picture I had taken, the one where he had been standing in the snow. I zoomed in. My stomach dropped. His face was clearer now. The blurred features had sharpened, the smudged outlines now detailed, and I knew why he looked so familiar. It was me. A distorted, wrong version of me. The same eyes, the same jawline, but stretched, twisted, like someone had taken my face and reshaped it into something else. A whisper brushed against my ear. "You remember now." I ran. Down the attic steps, through the darkened hallway, stumbling as my legs refused to move fast enough. My breath burned in my lungs, panic clawing at my throat. The walls seemed closer, the shadows stretched, shifting as if something unseen was moving with me. The house wasn't right anymore. The family portraits lining the hallway had changed. My parents' smiles were gone, their faces blurred, like his had been. Every frame, every photograph, every memory, corrupted. I reached the front door, fingers fumbling at the lock. The air around me grew heavier, colder, pressing down. I yanked the door open. The snow outside was untouched, silent, and standing at the end of the driveway, waiting in the falling white, was him. No longer hidden in the background, no longer lurking in the shadows of my memories, just standing there facing me, smiling. My phone vibrated in my pocket. My hands were shaking as I pulled it out, my breath frozen in my chest. A new photo notification number. I didn't take a picture. I opened the gallery. The image loaded. A close-up of me, taken from behind. Something exhaled against my neck, and then the lights went out. Story number 7, The Frozen Train. The train arrived in complete silence. No roar of the engine, no screech of metal against the frozen tracks. Just a ghostly drift through the swirling snow, stopping at the abandoned platform as if it had always been meant to. I had been waiting there alone, huddled in my coat, my breath curling into the freezing air. The blizzard had swallowed everything else. The station's lights flickered weakly, barely cutting through the dense white haze. And the town behind me was nothing but dark, snow-covered shapes. No one had said anything about a train still running in this weather, but it was here. I hesitated, glancing around for anyone else. There was no station attendant, no passengers, no sign of life at all. But when I looked at the train, the doors were open, waiting. A gust of icy wind howled past me, needling through my layers. I had two choices: stand there and freeze, or get on. I stepped inside. The warmth should have been instant, but it wasn't. The air was heavy, stale, wrong. My boots echoed against the metal floor as I moved further in. The lights above flickered weakly, casting a dim yellow glow over the narrow, empty aisles. I glanced at the seats. Some had open bags on them, books left mid-read, half-finished drinks. But there were no people. It was like they had just disappeared. The doors slid shut behind me. I spun around, heart hammering, but no one was there. The train lurched forward, smoothly gliding along the tracks, the outside world turning into nothing but a blur of white. My hands tightened into fists. Something wasn't right. I moved through the car, calling out. My voice didn't echo. The sound didn't carry. It was swallowed up, like the air itself was dense enough to absorb it. Then I saw the frost. It crawled up the windows from the outside, thick, white, pulsing like veins beneath glass. The further I walked, the thicker it got, ice creeping along the floor, the seats, even the air itself turning colder by the second. And then I noticed the first passenger, a man, sitting perfectly still, his head tilted, slightly downward. His coat was dusted with frost, his fingers curled around the armrest as if he had just been about to stand. His face was pale, too pale, his lips slightly parted, frozen mid-breath. I took a step closer. His eyes were open, wide, unseeing. Frost had formed over them, turning them a cloudy, frozen white. His eyelashes were stiff with ice, his skin cracked in places like he had been frozen alive. I staggered back, my breath curled in the freezing air. My mind screamed move, but my legs felt locked in place. And then he moved. Not much, just the faintest twitch of a finger, the smallest shift of his head. A strangled breath caught in my throat. He was alive, the lights flickered. The frozen man shifted again. His breath exhaled in a slow, ragged wheeze, clouding in front of his lips. I turned and bolted toward the next car. I pushed through the doors, heart hammering in my chest. The next train car was the same, empty but not. More passengers, frozen in place. A woman clutching a purse, her mouth frozen mid-word. A child slumped against a window, frost coating his hair. Their eyes were open, watching but not watching, and all of them were breathing. Slow, shallow, frozen breaths. The train rumbled beneath my feet. The air was colder now, thicker, harder to breathe. The frost stretched along the ceiling, winding around the dim lights like something alive. A whisper crackled through the intercom. Not words, not quite. Just a distorted, dragging sound like something breathing through the speakers. I turned, my pulse slamming against my ribs. At the far end of the train car, the frozen passengers were standing up, slowly, stiffly, all at once, their heads tilted toward me in eerie unison. I ran, down the aisle, through the doors, into the next car. The frost followed me, curling along the floor. The seats, the air growing thick with mist. Another whisper, another breath crackling through the speakers, and then I saw the conductor, standing at the end of the train car, motionless, dressed in a uniform that was too old, too worn. His face was lost in the dim flickering lights, his head tilted slightly, like he was listening. The intercom crackled again, and this time I understood the words. You shouldn't be here. The conductor took a step toward me. I took one back. My foot slipped on the ice. Cold hands grabbed my shoulders. I screamed, twisting. The frozen passengers were there, behind me, their hands stiff, their faces expressionless. The lights burst. The train lurched. And suddenly, I was standing on the platform again. The snow fell in thick, quiet sheets. My breath came in ragged gasps. The track stretched into the distance, untouched, covered in frost. The train was gone. No sound, no rumble, no sign that it had ever been there. I turned slowly. The station behind me was still empty. The town beyond it, buried in snow. But something felt different. The cold had sunk into my bones, deeper than before. My breath came too slow. My limbs felt stiff. I raised a shaking hand and wiped at my face. My fingertips came away dusted with frost. Story number 8. The snowfall that never stopped. It started snowing on a Wednesday. At first, no one thought anything of it. It was December after all. Snow was expected. The streets turned white. Rooftops disappeared beneath thick blankets of frost, and people went about their lives like they always did. By Friday, the snow still hadn't stopped. It should have slowed, should have let up for at least a few hours, but it didn't. It fell in thick, heavy sheets, relentless, suffocating. The roads disappeared, cars were buried, and the sky remained an endless, colorless gray. Schools closed, businesses shut down. People locked themselves inside, waiting for the storm to pass, but it never did. A week passed, then 2. The snowfall only grew heavier, the world outside turning into a frozen wasteland. Phone lines died. The power grid failed. The internet went out. The news anchors had gone silent, their last message repeating on an endless loop. Stay inside. Stay warm. Stay safe. Then the real fear set in. Food started running out. Some people tried to leave, trudging through the snowdrifts in search of supplies, in search of others. They never came back. And the worst part, their footprints always vanished. Within minutes, the snow would erase them, as if they had never been there at all. I watched from my apartment window, staring down at the streets below. The snow covered everything now. Cars, streetlights, entire buildings. The city was silent, dead. No movement, no sign of life. Just white, stretching endlessly. Then I saw something. At first I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me. A shape in the snow, barely visible through the heavy curtain of white. It stood motionless in the middle of the street, too far to make out any details. I blinked. It was closer, not walking, not moving, just closer. I stepped away from the window, heart hammering against my ribs. I had been inside for too long. Maybe I was imagining things. Maybe the isolation was finally getting to me. But when I looked again, the shape was gone. The snow kept falling. That night, I heard footsteps in the hallway. I held my breath, straining to listen. Slow, deliberate steps, muffled by the carpet, moving past my door. No one in my building had left their apartments in days. Then came the knocking. Soft at first, then louder. 3 sharp knocks. I swallowed hard, staring at the door. My hands curled into fists, my pulse thundering in my ears. I didn't move. The knocking stopped. The silence stretched, heavier than before. Then, from under the door, the snow began to seep in. I stumbled back, my breath caught in my throat. The snow moved too fast, sliding in like mist, creeping across the wooden floor. I scrambled for a towel, anything to block the gap. But when I looked back, it was gone, like it had never been there. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, the snow had buried the first 2 floors of the building. My window, on the 3rd floor, was now level with the ground, and there were footprints outside. They weren't deep, just faint impressions in the snow, barefoot, leading toward my window, but none leading away. I stayed away from the glass. I didn't want to see what was out there. Then, sometime around midnight, the whispers started. Not voices, not words, just sounds, like the wind was trying to form speech. They came from the vents, the walls, the floor, everywhere. Calling, beckoning. I covered my ears, curled into myself, rocking back and forth. The whispers knew my name. I wasn't alone anymore. The next day I made a decision. I couldn't stay. The food was nearly gone. The air was too cold, like the snow was inside the building now. The walls were lined with frost, the water pipes frozen solid. I packed what little I had left, layered up, forced open my window and stepped out into the snow. It swallowed me whole. The sky was no longer visible, just an unending gray void above me. The city was gone, buildings buried beneath the storm. Nothing remained but the endless white. And then I saw them, figures in the distance, standing, waiting. Their faces were wrong, stretched, frozen. Their eyes were pale blue, like the ice had consumed them, and they were all facing me. I turned to run, but the snow wouldn't let me. It clung to my legs, dragged at my arms, pulling me down, down, down. The whispers grew louder, now inside my head, inside my skull. Then, just before the snow took me, I understood. It had never stopped snowing, and it never would. Story number 9, The thing in my shadow. The first time I noticed it, I thought it was just my imagination. I had been outside, shoveling snow from the driveway, the evening sky already dark, the cold biting into my skin. The streetlights flickered dimly, casting long, stretched out shadows across the ice. That's when I saw it. My shadow didn't match my movements. I stopped, gripping the shovel tightly. The shadow should have stopped too, but it didn't. It lagged, just slightly. A split-second delay, as if it hadn't realized I'd stopped moving. A chill crawled up my spine. I shook my head, forced a laugh under my breath, and kept shoveling. Just my mind playing tricks on me. But later that night, in the glow of my bedroom lamp, I saw it again. I was brushing my teeth, watching my reflection in the bathroom mirror. The light behind me cast my shadow across the tiled wall. I turned my head slightly, and for just a second, my shadow's head stayed facing forward. I froze. The breath in my chest went still. My grip tightened around the toothbrush. Slowly, I turned my head again, testing it. My shadow followed. This time, perfectly in sync. I shook myself out of it, finished brushing, and shut off the light. Maybe I was overtired. Maybe the dim lighting had played tricks on my eyes. But deep down, something felt off. The next morning, the feeling didn't go away. I was walking through my apartment, the early sunlight filtering through the frost-lined windows. My shadow stretched along the hardwood floor, moving as it should. But then, as I passed the hallway mirror, something made me stop. My reflection was fine, but my shadow, it was standing still. My body kept walking, but the shadow stayed where it was, an empty, stretched-out version of myself, frozen in place. I stumbled back, a sharp gasp escaping my lips. As soon as I turned to look at it directly, it snapped back into place, perfectly normal, trailing my every move. My hands were shaking. My breath came in ragged, frozen puffs. I stood there for a long time, staring at my feet, watching the way my shadow clung to them. Then I tested something. I lifted my right arm. My shadow followed. I shifted my stance. It matched. I raised my left foot. My shadow raised its right. I ran, out of the room, out of the apartment, into the snow-covered streets. The cold air bit at my skin, but my pulse thundered harder than any chill ever could. The sun was brighter outside, the snow reflecting light in every direction, and that's when I saw it. With no walls, no dim rooms, no tricks of lighting. My shadow was still wrong. It was too tall, too thin. It stretched further than it should have, bending at impossible angles along the sidewalk. And the longer I stared, the more I saw it. The shape wasn't me. Not exactly. The fingers were longer. The shoulders were sharper. And the head tilted slightly, like something was watching me through it. I backed away, my breath sharp in the cold. I stepped left. My shadow hesitated before following. I stepped right. The hesitation happened again. Something else was inside it. I forced myself to move, my boots crunching through the deep snow. People passed me on the street, bundled in coats and scarves, unaware. No one noticed the way my shadow lagged behind. No one noticed the way it was watching me. I avoided mirrors after that. I avoided bright lights, dim lights, anything that would show it. But it didn't matter. I could feel it now. At night, in my apartment, I could hear it shifting against the walls. A slow, dragging sound, like something pulling itself across the floor. But every time I turned on the light, nothing. And then, one night, I woke up because it moved. I had been lying in bed, buried under thick blankets, the winter wind rattling against the windows. The room was dark, only a sliver of moonlight cutting through the blinds. And my shadow, it was standing up, not flat on the floor, not where it was supposed to be. It was standing beside the bed, tall, stretched, its shape even less human now. I didn't move. My breath came in shallow, uneven gasps. My hands curled into the sheets. I tried to convince myself I was dreaming, that any second I would wake up. Then it took a step toward me. The darkness in the room seemed to bend, pulling toward it like the very air was shifting around its presence. Another step, the shape twisted, its head tilting too far, as if studying me. My fingers crept toward the lamp on my nightstand. My pulse slammed against my ribs. The shadow moved faster. I grabbed the lamp, flicked it on, and nothing. The shadow was back where it should be, flat against the floor, harmless, perfectly normal. But I knew better now. I didn't sleep for the rest of the night. The next morning I packed a bag. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew I couldn't stay. I didn't trust my own reflection. I didn't trust my own shadow. And then, just as I reached for the door handle, I made one final mistake. I turned around. The sun was rising, the light spilling through the windows. My shadow stretched out behind me, long and dark against the wooden floor. And as I watched, it did something I didn't. It raised its hand and waved. Story number 10, The Wrong Face. I woke up to my roommate shaking me, his face pale in the dim light. His grip on my shoulder was tight, his breathing uneven. "You came home twice last night," he whispered. I blinked, still groggy. "What? The first time, you went to bed?" His voice was shaking. "The second time, you stood in the doorway and smiled at me." A slow chill crawled up my spine. I sat up, rubbing my eyes. That doesn't make sense. But he just stared at me. His eyes flicked toward my bedroom door, his hands gripping the blanket around him. I thought I was imagining it, thought I was dreaming, but it just stood there, watching me. My throat tightened. "And you're sure it was me?" He didn't answer, not at first. Then, finally, he whispered, "No." A silence stretched between us, thick and heavy. I could still feel the weight of his grip on my arm, his fingers ice cold. I swallowed hard, trying to push down the unease, clawing at my chest. Maybe he was overtired. Maybe he had a nightmare. But then he said something that made my blood run cold. "It was wearing your clothes. It looked like you. But the face," he hesitated. "It wasn't exactly right." I couldn't explain the feeling that settled in my stomach, like something had already gone wrong before I even had time to understand it. We sat in silence for a long time after that. Neither of us slept. The next morning I went through my routine like normal, but the tension never left me. My roommate barely spoke. His hand still trembled when he reached for his coffee. I tried to shake off the feeling, but the way he looked at me, like he wasn't sure I was real, made my skin crawl. That night, I locked my door. It wasn't something I usually did, but I couldn't shake the unease, the feeling of being watched. I left the hallway light on, letting the glow seep under the door, comforting myself with the faint warmth of reality. But in the middle of the night, I woke up. I didn't know why at first. Then I heard it, a soft shuffling from outside my door. I held my breath, my ears straining. The sound was quiet, deliberate, like bare feet moving slowly across the hardwood floor. My stomach twisted. Then a knock, software, rhythmic. My heart pounded. I reached for my phone, but my hands felt clumsy, my fingers too cold. I checked the time. 3:12 a.m. Another knock. Then, a voice. My voice. "Are you awake?" My skin crawled. It was identical to me. The tone, the pitch, the slight rasp in my voice when I was tired. But it wasn't coming from inside my room. It was outside. I gripped the blanket, my body frozen in place. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. Then, the voice spoke again. "Let me in." The doorknob rattled. I squeezed my eyes shut, my pulse slamming against my ribs. It wasn't real. It couldn't be real. The rattling stopped. Silence. Then, soft footsteps, moving away. I stayed awake until morning. When the sun finally rose, I forced myself to open the door. My hands were still shaking. The hallway was empty, the apartment silent. But something was off. I knocked on my roommate's door. No answer. I knocked again. "Hey, are you up?" Still nothing. Panic twisted in my stomach. I grabbed the handle and pushed the door open. The bed was empty, the blankets neatly folded. His phone sat on the nightstand, the screen dark. His shoes were by the door. His jacket still hung in the closet. He was gone. No note, no message. Just gone. I searched the whole apartment, my heart slamming against my chest. The front door was locked. The windows were shut. There were no footprints in the snow outside. Nothing. I called his phone, straight to voicemail. That was 3 days ago. I don't know what happened to him. And the worst part? Last night, I heard a knock on my door again. Software rhythmic. And then, my own voice whispered, "Where did he go?" Story number 11. The whispers beneath the ice. The first time I heard the whispers, I thought it was just the wind. The lake had frozen over weeks ago, thick sheets of ice stretching across the water, silent and still. The town always held its annual ice fishing event this time of year, but with the storm rolling in, most people had stayed home. I didn't mind. I liked the quiet. I had been sitting there for hours, bundled in layers, the hole I had drilled in the ice perfectly round, black water swirling beneath it. The wind howled through the trees, the sky a dull gray, stretching endlessly. But then I heard it. Software, faint, almost like whispering. I froze, my fingers tightening around the fishing rod. I turned my head slightly, listening. The ice creaked beneath me, but the sound wasn't coming from the surface, it was coming from below. I exhaled, trying to convince myself it was just shifting ice. That was normal, right? The lake was settling, the cold pressing against its surface, but the sound didn't fade. It got clearer. Muffled voices, too far to make out, drifting up from beneath the frozen lake. My breath curled in the air, my pulse quickening. I leaned forward, staring into the dark hole at my feet. The water barely rippled, black and endless. A shape moved beneath it. I scrambled back, my breath catching in my throat. It had been quick, barely visible, but something shifted down there. A shadow, slipping just beneath the ice, disappearing into the darkness. The whispers grew louder. I didn't realize I was holding my breath until my lungs burned. I exhaled shakily, gripping my knees to steady myself. Maybe it had been a fish. Maybe I had imagined it. But then something tapped against the ice, right beneath me. 3 sharp knocks. I jerked backwards so fast I nearly lost my footing. The knocks were deliberate, rhythmic, as if someone was knocking from beneath the ice. I wanted to run. Every instinct screamed at me to grab my gear and leave, but something made me stay. Maybe it was morbid curiosity. Maybe it was fear locking me in place. But I inched forward again, staring into the hole. The water was still, too still. The wind had died down. The trees had stopped swaying. Even my own breath felt muted. The world around me had gone completely silent. Then my reflection changed. My breath hitched. I was staring into the water, but the face looking back at me wasn't mine. It had my features, my eyes, my clothes, but it was smiling. I wasn't. My chest clenched, my entire body locking up. The reflection's grin widened, its lips splitting too far, stretching into something inhuman. Then it spoke. "Don't look up." My heart stopped. A cold breath brushed the back of my neck. I couldn't move, couldn't blink. Every muscle in my body screamed to run, but I was frozen, trapped in place. The ice beneath me creaked. Slowly, against every instinct, I looked up. There was nothing there. The lake was empty. The snow-covered trees stood motionless. The sky remained that dull, suffocating gray, but I wasn't fooled. The whispers hadn't stopped. They were closer now. I turned back to the hole. The reflection was gone. The water was just water. But deep down, I knew something had changed. I grabbed my gear with numb fingers, nearly dropping everything as I bolted toward the shore. My legs felt heavy, like the ice itself was pulling at me, reluctant to let me go. I didn't stop running until I reached my truck. When I slammed the door shut, I barely felt the warmth of the heater. My hands shook as I gripped the wheel. I didn't look back at the lake. I didn't need to, because I could still hear the whispers, and they were saying my name. If you made it this far, you're officially brave, or maybe just lucky. But tell me, have you ever experienced something unexplainable? Something that sent chills down your spine? Share your horror stories in the comments below. I'll be reading them. And if you enjoyed this nightmare, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and hit that bell icon so you never miss what's coming next. There are more terrifying stories waiting for you. Just click on the videos appearing on your screen if you dare.